Well, hey, thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Selah Leaders Podcast. We are so honored that you chose to join us today. My name is Nick Newman, and we're glad you're here. If this content impacts you in any way, do us a favor, like, comment, subscribe, share. Be sure to let somebody know that you're tuning in, because leadership is a journey that is best done with other people.
That's right.
I'm not doing this by myself today. I've got our podcast guy, Darren, who is with us in the house.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here every episode.
It's true.
Pretty reliably.
And in the house is literal because we film in
My house.
Darren's house. There may be a possibility for us soon to film in a different location.
Yeah.
Because we're getting some like temporary office space.
Yeah.
So we could there might be a little pop-up.
That'd be kind of cool, actually.
It won't be a pop-up where other people join us because it's not a big office space. But no, we're getting some office space to become more effective.
Yeah.
And but man, listen, today I'm really excited to kind of talk about our content because we are going to get into conflict resolution.
I've never had any conflict.
Well, that was going to be my question to you. Darren, have you ever had conflict in your life?
Not once, no. In fact, I tend to live in harmony with everyone that I come into contact with. So, yeah. So today's content, probably not relevant to me. No, I'm totally kidding. Yeah, I conflict resolution is something that I think every leader has to be prepared to deal with at some point. Because whether or not, you like it, you deal with people. And generally, all of us are flawed. We're all sinful. And so ultimately that means that there's going to be some conflict. There's going to be some strife that comes from just doing life with each other.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to know that as you navigate conflict, one of the things that I've learned is that conflict is typically a reflection of what's actually going on in my own life or like what's going on in me internally. I see that kind of flesh itself out when like someone says something to me and you circle back to them and go, well, you said this, and that's not what they said at all, right? Or you're having conversations, or maybe you just get real snippy with people, but really it's because you got something else going on back at home.
Sure.
Like this James 4:1 says, what is causing the quarrels and the fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires within you? And if we're not careful as leaders, we'll blame every bit of conflict we live in on the people on our team or the conditions of the company or the organization that we're in. But conflict is a direct reflection normally of some stuff going on within you.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a reflection of what's going on within you, your response to the conflict is absolutely an indicator of what's going on internally.
I think that's huge because I think there's so many times for many of us where when there is something going on, and sometimes we're not even able to acknowledge it yet, but we become so much more quick to take offense to things that are said. Certain things get under our skin at a different level that they don't normally when, you have to recognize that there's something within you that is causing that conflict.
Yeah, I love what one, I think it was a pastor who I heard say it one time. He said that offense is unavoidable. Being offended is a choice. You and I are not going to escape conflict.
Yeah.
Right? But living in conflict is a choice.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to do our best to kind of understand conflict. And sometimes it's knowing that the starting place might be me.
Right.
I might be unintentionally creating conflict on a team, all because of some internal struggles that I've got going on.
Yeah.
So as you begin to assess as a leader, know that like conflict is a reflection of what's going on with you internally, but also not all conflict is unhealthy.
Unpack that.
I don't trust people who say they have marriages that they never fight. How's that?
Yeah.
Because the benchmark of a healthy relationship is that we don't always agree with each other.
Yeah.
but we have the opportunity to resolve whatever problem comes up.
Healthy disagreements.
Absolutely. You can call it what you want. You got into a fight, right?
Right.
Not a physical fight, but you got into an altercation verbally.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's times where we have conflict with other people, and a lot of times we go, oh, well, if this relationship were truly healthy, we wouldn't have conflict.
Sure.
That's not how life works. I think about Proverbs when it says that iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The only way that you get a sharpening with iron to iron is that there's friction, there's sparks that are flying, there's a grinding that's taking place, and I'd hate to forfeit the benefit of growing in relationship with other people just because I've determined that like all conflict is a sign of unhealth. All conflict is bad. No, there is such a thing as healthy conflict, especially as you begin to lead larger teams and groups of people. We're all wired differently.
That's right.
And so as we look at goals and outcomes and objectives, there may be some conflict at the table on the best way to fulfill the mission and vision of our organization. That's not unhealthy. That's people approaching it a different way. And in church planting, it's been almost 9 years. I've had to learn that in the early days, I fully believed that like my way to accomplish the vision was the best way. And the longer I do leadership, I'm okay with meetings where in an honorable way we disagree. In an honorable way we fight for the best and most effective outcome. Not just what one particular individual wants to do.
And I think that's important too because, one of the things you just said, fighting in an honorable way. I think that's really important for people to understand what that looks like. Because I think there's a lot of times where when we think about fighting with one another, there's put downs, there's different things that I think people traditionally associate with conflict, right? What does fighting honorably really mean when you say it that way?
I think when you fight honorably, you choose to speak life into each other and remember that at the end of the day, I'm for you, not against you. We are on the same team. We want the most effective outcome. And I think that's why you become outcome focused, not preference focused. Even in our church today, there are things that most people would believe are my personal preferences because I feel like as a leader, I have a responsibility to, if this is what the team has decided, I will be its biggest advocate. I will run the play to the best of my abilities. There are things in our own organization that I'm like, preference-wise, this is absolutely not how I would do it. But my preferences don't really matter that much. What matters is that we, in our context, see people meet Jesus every weekend. What's the most effective way to do that? And so I think that's one of the ways that you fight honorably. But I think another way is like to really dive into healthy conflict resolution. Because if we know that conflict is not avoidable, if we know there's going to be times where we have tension with other people and we're going to end up in conflict, then we need to learn how to deal with it in a really healthy way. And so a couple of things for us as we kind of go into this, we've always said like Selah Leaders is a biblical podcast. We love the Bible. We love Scripture. And God lays out a blueprint for what conflict resolution looks like. And so I'm just going to give you some steps for conflict resolution really fast because I think it makes a big difference when we do it God's way. We get His will. And
that's right.
And so the first thing that we find is that we can make the first move. Matthew 18 says that we would go to the person who we have conflict with, or go to the person who has sinned against us. And so if you're wondering, like, I've got conflict with somebody on my team, what is the first step? The first step is to take the first step, is to make the first move, to not go around and talk about the conflict with other people, but to go talk to the person you have a problem with directly. That's the step.
Right.
Not to gossip on the team or, oh my gosh, did you know, did you hear? No, we want to fight for team unity.
Right.
The best way to do that is to go to that individual directly first. And I know what some of you are thinking, like, I just don't know what to say to that person. James says that if you ask the Lord for wisdom, he'll give it to you.
That's right.
So ask God for the wisdom and the direction for what you need to say to somebody on your team that you have conflict with. And I believe God's going to give you those words to speak. And then after that, Matthew 18 lays out that if the person is unresponsive, then you bring in leadership. So then you go the step above. So if the person who has wronged you is your peer, and you go to them and they're like, that is not what happened at all, you're ridiculous, whatever. Okay, then tag your boss in.
Right.
Say, hey, I'm having some conflict, and I want to make sure we have team unity. And if they don't like that, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You're doing it in an honorable way. But most conflict, I believe, is a result of miscommunication.
Yeah.
And so as you have these conversations, as you run the play for what it looks like to do it in an honorable way and to keep team unity, I think that we need to seek to understand before we seek to be understood.
So good.
There's always a reason why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And many times in conflict, we feel responsible to make them understand our position. It's a whole lot different to focus on helping, to focus on us understanding their perspective and their point of view. Because when you go, well, you said this and it really hurt me, they go, hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right now in this season, here's what I've got going on outside of work, and I took it out on you, and that's not fair. Well, you can carp down and still be mad and do that, but now you understand where they're at.
Right.
Gives you the opportunity as their team member to serve them and love them well. And so
good.
I think that those are like the really practicals.
Yeah.
And then just like a couple more.
Well, the one thing I was just going to say that too, like, one of the things that I love about this is not something that we're just talking about from a Selah Leaders Podcast perspective. Like, this is something, to your point, we talk about this organizationally. I firsthand have seen you, have a conversation with someone where, you knew they were coming to you about a specific conflict with someone else, and your very first response in every one of those situations was, well, have you had that conversation with that person yet? And I've seen you walk people from that conversation with you to that other person and say, hey, they've got a conversation they need to have with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because I think it goes to show, like, this is not something we're just talking about from a Selah Leaders perspective, but this is something that, we put into practice. It's something that you teach from a leadership perspective into all of the leaders of Propel Church as well. Yeah. And so the very first thing is, hey, like, you need to go and you need to have that conversation with that person. You need to make sure that, you are, you're asking God, obviously, for wisdom in it. And it's not a confrontation, but it's a conversation in love. It comes from a place of, hey, I care and I want to understand, what is this conflict between us? What's the cause of it? And if it is something where, hey, maybe the shoe needs to be put on the other foot. Yeah. That's not a conversation that's going to come from just going right to your leader. That's not a conversation that's going to come from potentially bleeding down into someone else. Yeah. That's a conversation that can only come from that, that one-on-one interaction with that person who you're having conflict with.
It's so good, man. And I think when you end up having those hard conversations and you're dealing with conflict, you got to come with notes.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared for the conversation. Like, don't walk in and go, I feel like blank, having no context for when certain situations happen.
Yeah.
Because I've found that a lot of times when I talk to somebody about the way they made me feel, they go, when did this happen? And when I'm not prepared,
Yeah.
I'm just shooting from the cuff, and it doesn't honor them.
Right.
And it's not actually beneficial at all, because then it brings into question the validity of what actually happened to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think you come in with notes, you speak the truth in love. If you can't speak the truth in love but feel obligated to speak the truth in frustration, you need to hold your tongue
Yeah.
until you have the ability
Yeah.
to speak the truth in love, because it's often not what you say but how you say
That's
it.
exactly right.
So make sure you're ready for that. And then we fix the problem, not the blame. Blaming other people doesn't actually give us the ability to move forward as a team.
Yeah.
But addressing the problems that are in front of us
Yeah.
help us resolve the conflicts that are in front of us.
Yeah. I think it's so important too, because there are so many times where I think we associate conflict with a person
Yeah.
and not the situation, not the circumstances, but the person.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important for us, especially growing leaders. I think that's especially true, where
Yeah.
it's, hey, like, I've not had enough experience yet to necessarily see that. And so I think that's an encouragement to, leaders that have is, hey, make sure you're pouring into your leaders that you're bringing up and that you're raising up in your organization, because I think it's so critical for them to see exactly that.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. So we're at that point in the episode every month, where we take a leader submitted question, and we love getting these leader submitted questions. You can send these and submit these via the comments in YouTube. You can also send an email to info@selahleaders.com. But this week's question, I like this one. What do you do if someone on your team has become toxic?
Okay, so there's a couple things. If somebody on your team has become toxic, I think you got to clearly articulate what is actually toxic. Are they divisive? Is it their negative attitude? Do they gossip?
Yeah.
Do they undermine authority? What is the toxic thing? And you run the same conflict resolution play we just talked about.
Yeah.
You go to that person first and you say, hey, your actions are negatively impacting our team.
Yeah.
And if they continue, you're going to put me in the position as a leader where I have to choose between keeping you around or allowing our team to become unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I've found that shooting straight with people is the best method, to be honest. And I've had that direct conversation that, hey, if this continues, you're putting me in the position where I have to choose between keeping you around or the team becoming unhealthy, and I cannot risk the health of our team.
Right.
And when you shoot that straight with people, I've found that it does one or two things. One, very rarely do they want the team to be unhealthy. They also themselves don't want to be unhealthy. So then you create a plan for what it looks like to get out of that.
Yeah.
So if they have a negative attitude, you give them metrics of, hey, every time we talk, you come to me with 5. You consistently come to the meeting with 3 negative things.
Yeah.
For every 1 negative thing, I need you to have 3 positive
That's
things.
so good. Yeah.
And in the event that you can't have 3 positive things, you don't get to address your negative thing.
Right.
And so there's different ways that you work around it, different strategies that you put in place. So I don't think people want to be unhealthy. I don't think they want the team to be unhealthy. But I've found that when you have that honest conversation, it also doesn't shock them when you have to come back to them in the event you need to release them or, bless them to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's not really a shock because you had the conversation with them and things didn't change.
Yeah. That's good, because you're setting that expectation up front. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love that. Well, this has been a great episode. Lots of great conversations, specifically around conflict resolution. And hopefully this isn't your first episode that you've tuned into, but if it is, hey, we've got a great back catalog through season 1. We're now 5 episodes, 6 episodes into season 2. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend, another leader in your life, maybe your grandma. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out this month's episode of the Selah Leaders Podcast. Darren and I are so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us today to check it out. But do us a favor, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend, family, or another leader in your life. It would truly make a huge difference.
Yeah, and if you'd like more information, jump over to SelahLeaders.com.